San Francisco, October 1st, 2013, just after 3 in the afternoon. A 29-year-old man walks into the Glen Park Public Library, climbs the stairs, and finds a quiet table over in the science fiction section. Nothing unusual about any of it. He opens his laptop the same way he has 1,000 times before. And what he doesn't know, what he has no way of knowing, is that federal agents have been watching him for weeks. They're in the room with him right now. The moment his laptop wakes up and connects, they move. No warning, no knock. A man and a woman standing nearby, who look exactly like an ordinary couple, suddenly start arguing loudly right beside his table. And then, in one motion, they slam him against the floor-to-ceiling window. For one critical second, his hands are pinned, away from the keyboard. And that second is the entire operation. Because that laptop has a kill switch built into it. One keystroke, and everything on it encrypts itself. Gone. Unrecoverable. They needed him caught red-handed, with his fingers on the keys and his session still open. And that's exactly what they got. So, what was actually on that laptop? The complete back end of a website that had processed more than $1.2 billion in transactions. Drugs of every kind. Weapons. Hacking tools. All of it sold anonymously, shipped through ordinary mail, and paid for in a currency that almost nobody outside a small corner of the internet had even heard of at the time. Bitcoin. The site was called Silk Road. For 2 years, it had quietly made this man one of the most successful criminals on the planet. And nobody knew. Not his neighbors, not his friends, not his family. Online, the thousands of people buying and selling on his site knew him only by a name he'd borrowed from an old pirate movie. Dread Pirate Roberts. His real name was Ross Ulbricht. And in that library, in about 3 seconds, the man and the myth finally became the same person. Now, here's the question that makes this story so strange. How does a physics graduate from Texas, a guy his friends describe as thoughtful and idealistic, end up building $1 billion criminal empire from a laptop in a coffee shop? Let me take you back to where it actually starts. Chapter 1. The Idealist. Ross Ulbricht grew up in Texas. Smart kid, curious. He got a degree in physics, then went on to do a master's in materials science engineering. By every account, he was the kind of person people liked being around. Calm, thoughtful, a bit philosophical. And he believed something, genuinely and deeply. He believed adults should be free to make their own choices about their own lives, without a government watching and punishing every single transaction. Now that's not a criminal instinct. That's closer to a political conviction. Plenty of people believe it. But convictions like that can take you somewhere dangerous when you happen to have the right tools, at exactly the right moment in history. And around 2010, Ulbricht did. Chapter 2. The Tools. 2 technologies had quietly matured by then, and almost nobody was paying attention to either of them. The first was a browser called Tor. It bounces your connection through multiple layers of encryption, hiding your location and your identity almost completely. It was built for privacy, for journalists, for activists, for people living under regimes that monitor everything. The second was Bitcoin, a currency with no bank behind it, no name attached to a transaction. Difficult, though as it turns out, not impossible, to trace. On their own, both were niche tools used mostly by privacy advocates and computer scientists. But Ulbricht looked at the 2 of them together and saw something nobody had built yet. A marketplace that no government could easily shut down, and no payment processor could follow. So in January 2011, working mostly alone, he launched it. He called it Silk Road, a reference to the ancient trade routes that once connected entire civilizations, right across every border in between. And at first, almost nothing happened. A handful of users, a handful of listings. But that was about to change faster than anyone, including him, could have predicted. Chapter 3. Dread Pirate Roberts. Online, Ulbricht never used his own name. He built a whole persona instead. And it wasn't what you'd expect from someone running a drug marketplace. He was calm, articulate. He wrote to his users almost like a philosophy lecturer, long, thoughtful posts about freedom and personal choice. He called himself Dread Pirate Roberts, borrowed from a character in a classic film where the pirate isn't actually one person at all. It's a title, passed down person to person to keep the legend alive. Which tells you a lot about how he saw himself. Replaceable, a symbol rather than a single point of failure. And under that name, Silk Road grew into something almost nobody could believe was real. Drugs of nearly every kind, forged documents, hacking tools and services. But here's the part that genuinely surprised people when it came out. It worked exactly like a normal online shop. Product listings with photographs, customer reviews, 5 stars for fast, discreet shipping, complaints when a package showed up late or the packaging was sloppy. It looked less like a criminal enterprise and more like an ordinary e-commerce site that just happened to sell things that could put you in prison. By its final year, Silk Road had processed over $1.2 billion in total sales, taking a commission on every transaction that passed through it. Ulbricht was reportedly earning millions. And through all of it, he lived almost invisibly. A quiet apartment in San Francisco, a laptop at a coffee shop, a polite young man his neighbors barely registered. The only trace he ever left behind him was code. But here's the thing about code. It always leaves a trail. And somewhere out there, 3 different federal agencies had already started pulling on the thread. Chapter 4. The First Thread. The hunt for Silk Road didn't start with a raid. It started with a single forum post. In January 2011, the very same month Silk Road quietly went live, a government tax investigator was browsing an online forum, more or less out of curiosity, and came across a post advertising a new website, a hidden marketplace only reachable through Tor. He noted it. Interesting, but not urgent. Nothing to act on. 8 months later, that same investigator noticed something else, a job posting from the exact same forum user. And this one told interested applicants to send their applications to a specific email address. That email address was registered under a real name, Ross Ulbricht. Now that wasn't proof of anything, not yet. It was just a thread, one of dozens that investigators across several different agencies were quietly pulling on, with no idea yet that they all led back to the same place. Chapter 5. The Mistakes. And this is the uncomfortable truth about how Ulbricht was caught. It wasn't one dramatic error. It was years of small ones, ordinary human carelessness from a time before he fully understood how much he had to hide. There was an early forum question about anonymous website hosting, posted under his real identity months before Dread Pirate Roberts even existed. There was an old, long-abandoned email account that happened to share its unusual name with the technical server actually running Silk Road. There were records of international travel to a known offshore tax haven. And there was an earlier, much smaller case involving counterfeit identification documents, sent, investigators discovered, to an address that matched his own. Take any one of those on its own and it means basically nothing, a coincidence, a dead end. But by the middle of 2013, 4 separate federal agencies started comparing notes properly for the first time. And they realized they weren't looking at 4 different threads. They were looking at one. And once they had a name, they needed the thing that's actually hard to get. Proof. Chapter 6. The Trap. Investigators put Ulbricht under surveillance, and they noticed something remarkable. Every time he opened his laptop, Dread Pirate Roberts logged into Silk Road. Every time he closed it, Dread Pirate Roberts logged off. Over and over, for weeks. The man and the myth were breathing in the same rhythm. But knowing wasn't enough, because Ulbricht had a kill switch on that laptop. One keystroke, and every piece of evidence would encrypt itself instantly. They'd have to catch him with his hands on the keys and his session open. October 1st, 2013. Agents follow him to his usual coffee shop. It's full, so he crosses the street to the Glen Park Public Library instead, sits down in the science fiction section, and opens his laptop. An agent watching nearby sees Dread Pirate Roberts come online at that exact second. Then a couple standing beside him start arguing loudly. Just an awkward public scene, the kind everyone politely ignores. And in one motion, they slam him against the library window. His hands come off the keyboard before he understands what's happening. The most successful criminal marketplace in internet history didn't end with a hack, or a raid, or a car chase. It ended with 2 strangers pretending to have an argument. He was convicted in 2015 and sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. Then, in January 2025, more than 11 years later, Ross Ulbricht received a full presidential pardon and walked out of prison a free man.